Imagine yourself in 1917 when you receive on your doorstep a letter from the military saying you have to join up the army and get into the trenches. Well, it wasn't really our decision to use trench warfare. Rather, it was our allies' decision. So we got on our bellies and ate dirt. There was 3 reasons why trench warfare was a bad idea. Like, the living conditions were terrible, there was no escape from the artillery fire, and there was hardly any progress. First of all, let's look at the fact that living conditions were terrible. Living conditions were terrible in the trenches because the supplies would occasionally get lost or was never really sent, according to historyofamericanwars.com. Our country couldn't supply thousands of our troops overseas because we never really fought in the lands overseas. We really only fought on the home front. The men would be farther inland than anticipated. Like, say, the supplies was told that our troops would be 10 miles inland from the drop zone, when really we were like 15 or maybe 17 miles away from the drop zone. So a lot of our guys had to make do with mostly eating rats that were found in the trenches. The supplies such as food, clothes, ammunition never made it. According to the first WWI.com, the trenches were full of rats. Also, our boys had to dig small rectangular holes on the side of the trenches. Those served as sleeping quarters, according to the dailycost.com. The men had nowhere else to sleep. It also kept them out of the rain. Secondly, another reason why trench warfare was not a good idea because there was no escape from artillery fire, according to militaryfactory.com. The artillery was basically trying to get a lucky shot into the trenches because that's where the enemy was and that's where we were. Whoop-de-doo. If one does hit inside the trenches, you would see men wounded, limbs missing, or scattered at your feet in little tiny pieces because the shells are coming at you 100 miles per hour. And those things would hit pretty hard. The only safe zone would be at the far end of the trenches near the reserves. The reserves were placed at the rear of the trenches. Plus, the reserves were far away from the front lines, which was being pelted by artillery fire, both of artillery and motors. Finally, there was hardly any progress to the war through trench warfare during World War I. The war was a stalemate, basically. We would take their trenches, and they would recapture them, and they would capture ours, and then we would recapture them. Both sides used different weapons. We used napalm, they used flamethrowers. We won because we scared them. They didn't expect a whole lot of Americans since we joined in late, and they underestimated us for our determination to win. Knowing what we know now, using trench warfare was a bad idea during World War I because the living conditions were terrible, there was no escape from the artillery fire, and there was hardly any progress. Think about it. If you had a chance to go back to 1917, excuse me, my tongue, and join the World War, would you want to be in a trench, or would you want to end the war quicker by scaring the enemy with our determination to win? Just remember, the next time there's a war, don't get in the trenches.